Okay, so I've just started the recording, and if you want to say anything off the record, just let me know, and otherwise we'll also make a decision at the end of the call whether we're going to keep the recording and how available it's going to be. So this is a general call. Um, yeah, so welcome both of you, and how is it going, and what have you come up against, and what would you like to bring to the support call? Basically, it's anything that's going on for you that you want to discuss.
Um, I'm well. Go first. I'm well, thanks. Yeah, I've been. I seem to have like a period of, like we talk about the children having those ups and downs and like times of really intense like looking at things or learning, and then other times where it's just kind of other things take over, or you get a bit distracted, or you just need the relax. And I think I went through that phase, and now I recently started. I don't know why I forget what started me onto listening to some Gabor Maté. I think I don't know how you say his name, but I started watching a video by him, and then that led me to his book. And I've been like crazily hold on to your kids. I've been crazily reading that one over the last week. I nearly finished now, but yeah, I was one like, so my question really is like, and I don't know if you're familiar with his work at all,
Yeah, a little bit, not
but
very.
yeah, yeah, it's all really very well. Actually, it's not really his book. He kind of co-authored it, and then a lot of the work comes from his partner, whose name I can't remember now. But basically it's a lot about attachment, and their concern at the moment is like that there's a kind of spread of instead of parent attachment, people are starting to, in the void of parental attachment and like the pressures of life and society, like to not really value that parental attachment, is leading to peer attachment instead, and he calls it peer orientation. And so that's leading apparently to this kind of culture, youth culture, which is really faddy and kind of aggressive and immature, and that he's stressing that we need more parental attachment, and for parents to claim back that attachment space with their kids, and not and be there as a presence rather than any of the parenting skills and strategies that you're meant to be, or that people are sold like, at the moment. It's more about just that, you mentioned positive unconditional regard, or the other way around, unconditional positive regard.
Yes.
So like, yeah, that with and how important it is, and being accepting and loving base, so then that learning and everything can grow from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was wondering how that relates to self-directed educational spaces, which are often very child like
Yes.
the majority are the children, like, and so you don't have those, maybe, or maybe you do. I think the ratios change in different spaces, but like, is there enough adult like availability for that attachment, or is it still kind of encouraging kids to attach to people who are immature still, and learning their own way already? So yeah, that's my question for today.
Okay, that's a lovely question. Okay, and somebody's just arrived, and it is. Hi, who's there? I actually don't know. Let me just click on your good name. Um,
It's
Lynn.
Lynn.
Okay, great. Lynn, you've arrived at a beautiful time. Hi, Lynn.
Good. Hi everyone.
Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
So yeah, Tasha, it's going to be difficult, but would you be able to summarize your question quickly? I'm just trying
um,
to get back to my Discord screen. There we.
yeah,
Escape.
Oh no.
Press
so
escape.
Okay. I can't get out of Lynn's profile. I'm such an
You press
hassle.
escape.
Oh, just escape. Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm back. Okay, fantastic. In fact, you know what? Let me repeat your question, because then I'll also get
cool.
clear if I've got it or not, and you can correct me. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
So, Lynn, have you come across Gabor Maté at all?
No, that doesn't sound familiar.
Okay. So I don't know very much about him, just a little bit. I just sort of checked it out briefly. because some of his approach I resonate with, and some of it I think is maybe a little bit of that the blind men all looking at the elephant. Does
Okay.
everybody know that parable? Everybody know the parable of the blind men and the elephant?
Yeah. Why?
No.
No. Okay, so briefly, um, there's different versions of it, but several blind people go to discover what is an elephant at the same time. And the one takes hold of the trunk and says the elephant is like a snake. The other one takes hold of the ear and says the elephant is like a fan. The other one touches the side of the elephant and says it's like a wall. And the other one grabs the tail and says
Okay.
it's like a rope. And the other one grabs the foot and says it's like a tree.
Okay.
So the point is that very often people hit on something that is very, very true and very, very useful to contemplate, but they might put it together in a way that doesn't really have the whole picture, and so it gets distorted and becomes a distorted picture. Personally, that's my feeling about Gabor Maté. Yes, I think he's talking about something that's very important and very true, but I think he's missing some elements of the picture that create a distortion. So the question that Tasha was saying is that Gabor Mate is very concerned about the lack of attachment between parents and children, that there's not enough closeness, and that, to use the language from our course, according to polyvagal theory, there's not enough co-regulation going on between parents and children. And so the children are becoming peer identified and looking at their peers for the enculturation that really he's saying should come from the parents, and that's creating quite a faddy, negative kind of culture. And then, Tasha, you were asking, how does that fit together with self-directed education, where the age mixing is considered to be sort of, now these are my words, but the age mixing is considered to be sort of one of the real, as Daniel Greenberg says, secret weapons or great strengths. And we actually want the children to have a space to get out from underneath the parent's wing and explore their own independence and explore the richness of those peer relationships. So you're trying to put those two things together. Have I about got that question clear?
Yeah, that's it. Like whether you can't have both together, or if it's possible still to.
Yes. Yeah, I don't see them as at all contradictory. Does anybody else want to jump in with some input on that before I go on one of my rants? Okay, so I'll go on one of my rants and you can interrupt me. Yeah,
Go for it.
okay. So I think attachment is hugely important, and I think a lot of people who are resonating with self-directed education instinctively know this, because attachment is where babies are at, for example. And if you are going to take self-directed education seriously, then you probably, if you already know quite a lot about it, you're probably going to have quite an attachment parenting style. For example, when your babas are young, you want them to be who they are and meet their needs and be there for them, so that their own internal unfolding is respected and their needs are affirmed, and their ways of expressing are affirmed, and their ways of solving their challenges are met in an empowering way. So, for example, I know one of the things that Maté speaks about that I think is critically important is, the whole thing of responding to a baby who's in need. For example, just a baby who wants attention. It's very destructive to buy into that sort of popular idea of, oh, they're just crying to get attention. Attention's a completely valid need, and we need to be able to meet those needs for our children, for them to develop a healthy sense of self and a healthy ability to relate, and to be connected and attached. So he's definitely gotten hold of a part of that elephant, and he's spot on. I think it would be very, very difficult for a child who doesn't have a secure attachment relationship with some or other caregiver to self-direct their education, because it's really where we develop our sense of safety and our sense of I am competent and I'm okay as I am, because these other people in my life who matter to me are constantly giving me this feedback that I'm good to be with and my needs are met, which means they're valid. So it's easy for me to trust myself now in my curiosity and my going forward, because I've been met there rather than being ignored or abandoned. And these are critically important things to look at this particular point in time, because I think he's right that we're at a crisis for attachment. If you look at how more and more babies are being born by cesarean section and going straight into incubators, for example, far more babies going into ICU just as a routine thing, it's an enormous interruption of the attachment process. And then they get home and the parents are busy on their screens and their devices and not really paying clear attention to the child's cues. Babies trying to make eye contact and the parents not meeting their eyes, not looking at them. 3-year-olds playing next to the mommy on the floor while mommy's on Facebook, or being put into creche at 6 weeks, for example, is incredibly common now. And I do think that all of this is definitely having an impact that I don't personally see as being of benefit to anybody's growth and well-being. The research is there. Children, especially in the first 3 years, need a really affirming, close, reliable relationship with a primary caregiver who needs to be there with them. And that's a self-directed education facilitation at its beginning. You know, when a child expresses boredom, for example, a little tiny baby expresses boredom, a caregiver who's tuned in is going to provide stimulation. It's going to take the child to somewhere where there's something nicer to look at, like trees, leaves moving, for example. A caregiver who's not tuned in is not going to facilitate that self-directed desire to explore. They're going to maybe leave the child crying in the cot and say, they're just crying to be a nuisance. And then, of course, there's the latest trend, which is, you know, the iPad docking station. Who have we just lost? Was that Lynn?
Lynn.
Okay, I think she'll probably be back in a sec. So luckily we are recording the call, so she'll be able to fill in the gaps. So the iPad docking station. Hi, Lynn, you back? Okay. You haven't missed anything. We were just commenting on the fact that you'd probably be back soon. Can you hear me okay, Lynn?
Yes,
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's not a problem.
Screen just went blank.
Okay. So I don't know if you're aware of the iPad docking stations on cots now. You
Oh,
know,
no.
I mean,
Oh,
my
goodness.
gosh, what a plan.
No.
I mean, again, that is a complete interruption of self-directed education at a very, very early age, that you're providing this completely artificial external stimulus that the child has no control over, hasn't requested, doesn't relate to, and there's nobody to mediate that. So from that perspective, I think, as I say, Gabor Maté has got a very important, very powerful message. I think he hasn't encountered the part of the elephant that explains the importance of the peer relationship. And as I've just said, I think a child who doesn't have a sufficient attachment relationship with a primary caregiver, I can't say because I haven't done this specific research, but I strongly predict, as an educated guess, that those children are going to find it harder to self-direct their education later. If they have been used to taking what's dished out, being subjected to a passive role of this active stimulus too young, it's going to be harder for them later to trust their own curiosity and flow with it. So I think he's our friend, you know, when we're looking at that early childhood relationship. I think um, the part of the elephant that is missing is that once there is that attachment relationship, it's like that old cliche, that we need to give our children roots and wings.
Mm.
It's like once they've got their roots, they need their wings. And actually, parents can't stick on wings. It's like wings is something that the children have to develop themselves. And keeping your children too close is going to keep them like in a pot plant, root bound. Um, and I think all we need to do is um, look at look at children's own truth. The first thing that a well-attached toddler does, as proof of how well attached they are, is they go further from the mum to explore the environment, and they
Mm.
return to her to touch base. The insecurely attached infant is not going to leave mom's side because they're too anxious to explore the environment. And the very, very badly attached infant is going to ignore mom because they're already in anxiety. They've given up on having a sense of attachment. They don't know how to get it. And they're going to be pretty much the same with their close caregivers as they're going to be with strangers. They're still sort of looking for a sense of attachment. And I think that that's what Gabor Maté is concerned about, because we can extrapolate that growth up. The same behavior in that very badly attached infant moving forward into childhood and teenagerhood, yes, is going to end up, for example, pregnant at the age of 12 because they are looking for some kind of firstly, physical affection, that they haven't had the cuddles and the physical closeness, and it's a human craving, um, and some kind of special love that is to fill this void of where that's supposed to be. Or, for example, early drug addiction, again, trying to get that sense of some kind of significance or drown the pain, because humans are not meant to be alone. We're meant to be co-regulating, if we go back to all of that polyvagal theory with Porges. So, yeah, he's spot on with that. There is a form of negative, but I think what he's missing is it's not that it's about peer identification, it's about being lost and desperate. And you could as much say it's attachment to fashion labels, or attachment to drugs, or attachment to consumer goods, because you've really got a peer group, a toxic peer group expression that is attached to all of those things because they're all feeling empty, but they're not actually attached and identified with each other. They're all pretty lost.
Mm.
Um, so I just want to pause there at this moment before I go further rambling, because I think I've said enough that it's time for people to comment or respond. Yeah. Where are we at?
I think I agree with you. I think that the people who are in the self-directed environments, they're probably the emergent learners who, like he mentions, like people who like are really like thrive in self-directed environments, and maybe the more immature people who are without great connections, they're not going to, well, they wouldn't even have taken their kids out in the first place because they didn't realize how badly it's affecting their relationship or any of that, and maybe they don't have
Yeah.
the great relationship to begin with, and yeah, I think I agree that if you're following your kids, then you're probably quite attuned to them, and the relationship is good, and except in the really permissive parenting field, I guess. But then I don't know that they would survive very well in a self-directed environment if you're like really ego-driven and bossy. Yeah.
Yeah. So permissive parenting in that sense is, again, it lacks attachment, because
Mm.
you're talking about the insecurity of the parent who doesn't know what to do, feels helpless, feels unsupported, and basically resigns and says, I can't be a
You do that.
parent. But I
Yeah.
happen to be here, and sometimes I might make some food available. Um,
Yeah.
uh, and yes, that is going to go along. That's going to be one of those parenting styles that's going to create attachment problems, um, because there isn't a sense of engagement between the parent and the child. So just to rewind for a minute so we've just looked at the problem of the very badly attached child who's growing up looking for they know not what. But if you just rewind to the other two types, the one who's securely attached is very, very ready for self-directed education. And I want to come back to them in a minute, but I just want to park them for a minute. My problem with Maté is the other type of the child who is insecurely attached in a way that then creates a clingy inability to explore the environment and to grow those wings. And my worry is that Maté can be, um, I think the way he's expressing right now with his partial elephant could encourage parents to make that error to actually smother their children, which would be unfortunate because that would be a
Yeah.
distortion of the good thing that he's gotten hold of.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I agree.
this is part of
Yeah.
what I don't know if you guys engaged with that whole thing around Sudbury Valley School versus unschooling and
Yeah,
Daniel
I
Greenberg's
read that
criticism of
article.
unschoolers.
Mm.
Okay, because that is one of the things that's underlying what he's saying is when he encounters unschoolers who are not letting their kids out from under their wing, who
Mm,
are over involved in their children's lives, who are keeping them too close and can't actually allow them to develop those wings, that is a problem.
mm,
Um, and it's not self directed education at that point. It's an expression of that parent's anxiety, and it's going to have an impact on the child's ability to develop social skills. And I have seen that. I've also had experience with that. Um, so the child becomes socialized to adults rather than being socialized um, in a broader way. So a child who's securely attached, let's come back to that parked child. The child who's securely attached comes back to mom or the primary caregiver to touch base and get that reassurance and get filled up, and then goes off on an adventure and comes back and goes off on an adventure and comes back. Um, that's a child who's going to be able to very, very easily self-direct. And they're going to, in a self-directed education environment, they're going to become very strong. Their social skills are going to become very strong in a very egalitarian way, which is where you see your classic Sudbury kid who can talk to their peers, socialize in an egalitarian kind way with younger people rather than being nasty to them, um, and can talk confidently to adults. They're socialized across the board. Whereas the child who's kept too close only learns to socialize with adults, and there can be quite a lot of trouble socializing with peers. And I don't have personal experience of what that looks like as a grown up, um, but I have my suspicions that it would carry over to having a problem as a grown up, because I imagine they would still be looking for those adult analogs. You'd probably find people who are quite authority figure oriented, for example, because they're looking for that analog now that they're grown up. It's not that they're suddenly going to relate to other grown ups because they learned how to relate to grown ups. They learned how to relate to grown ups as a child. They never quite learned how to relate to somebody who's exactly on the same level. So I've seen, for example, a child who's extremely articulate, looks fantastic on paper, um, but will walk up to another child and just take the toy out of that child's hand because there's no awareness of that person as a human being. There's no idea of how to negotiate because the contact has always been with adults. So the play skills are missing, the negotiation skills are missing, the conflict resolution skills are missing because they've always been related to by somebody who knew more and was wise and had all these fantastic attachment parenting skills. So the child's constantly met. And that's what Daniel Greenberg's talking about in that article when he says, yeah, developing social skills that work when you're under your parents' wing, and once you're out from there, what? So then you really have to have an adult environment that's always going to be accommodating you because you never actually learned how to create your own accommodation. Um, so that's where I worry about overemphasizing what Maté is saying. Um, Feel free to interrupt me, otherwise I'm about to head off on another track down the peer, the value of the peer age mixing. Pause. Anybody want to put anything in at this point? Okay, I can't hear anybody, so I'm going to quickly pop back in. Okay, I think somebody was speaking there, but I couldn't hear them. Is that correct?
Yeah, sorry, it's me.
Okay, I'm back. Okay.
Can you hear
So
me now?
sorry, yeah, I can hear you now. Could you repeat whatever you said? Would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I was wondering where he was going to go with that part because like it seems very like I mean so much adult focus that like I mean, at least in his book that I was like, well, when exactly are they meant to get some peer interaction? But I'm wondering if I'm reading it that way because like but it's just that his focus is so much on the adult connection that then he doesn't put enough maybe on the other side. And I wasn't sure if that was just my interpretation or perception of it. Yeah, and that I was expecting more from him because I think that he's still living in the world of I mean, the norm of like kids going to a school and spending like the majority of their day away from their adults, right?
Yeah.
From what yeah. And I haven't got to the part of the attachment village thing that is the last part of the chapter, or last part of the book. Sorry, but yeah, I was wondering where he goes with.
Yeah. I don't know because I haven't got that far either. I don't really have time to explore roads that aren't fundamentally useful to me.
Yeah,
So I go just far
yeah,
down enough to go, okay,
enough.
he's only got the
Yeah,
trunk, he
not
doesn't know the
useful.
tail, move on.
Yeah, yeah,
The fact is, as far as I know, according to my awareness and what Peter Gray has written, he's just plain inaccurate. Even if you look at things
okay.
like the continuum concept, and I mean, my mother's an anthropologist, so I've had a fair bit of
Yeah,
immersion in all of this stuff. He's just inaccurate. An attachment village isn't child with adult. That's nuclear. That's
yeah,
new. It's new for kids to be stuck with adults at home. And I
yeah.
think there's too much of that going on too.
I wondered about that because Peter Gray goes on about or my dad as well, like the times where they could have like so much unlimited like play out like themselves without having to be
Exactly.
always guarded by adults. So yeah, that part didn't strike me as true
No, if you look, I
in
mean,
a
again,
historical sense.
yeah, I mean, again, there's
Yeah,
studies literally looking at this is how far the grandfather free range, this is how far the mom free range, this is how
yeah,
far the son now gets to free range. And if you go further back in
yeah,
history, it's wilder. I mean, it was absolutely normal, even in industrial and agricultural, never mind hunter-gatherer cultures, for
yeah,
the kids to disappear for the day and
yeah.
forage for their lunch,
Hmm.
and rock up at supper time, because they needed somewhere safe to sleep. That's normal. So I don't know
Yeah.
where Mate is getting this other idea from because,
But
yeah,
is that where it is though? Like, because wouldn't they also have like they'd be able to choose, say, okay, I'm going to go and learn how to carve my bow, say, with this adult who's like doing that. So there was a lot more like acceptance of adults to children in a way, like like even
yes,
if they weren't their own. So I was wondering if that's more his take on it. He's not saying that there shouldn't be like children together, but that there were more adults available for attachment if the children wanted it.
yes. And that aspect again is holding on to a nice piece of the elephant. And that's exactly
Mm,
why a lot of us far prefer a Sudbury type model, um,
yeah.
where there is a variety of adults with whom they can form a relationship. And
Yeah.
then the danger there is that people might be reading it that no, rather keep your child nice and close in your grip.
I was worried about
Um,
that too.
and then the relationships that they're going to form with other adults might again be not as deep, because you're going to your karate teacher once a week, you're going to your pottery teacher
Yeah.
once a week. It's completely different from a Sudbury type setup where you can see those adults every day of the week, and you've got time
Yeah.
to choose who you want to be with when, and really build continuity.
Yeah.
It's very rich. So again, he's got hold of a good part of the elephant there. We need that, but we need to get the whole picture so that it doesn't become distorted.
I feel like he could be used for good and evil.
Well, couldn't everything, but
Yeah.
yeah. So the thing that he's also missing is that the child doesn't first go to the adults to get help with making the spear. That's quite an advanced level of learning before they're going to do that. The child naturally is going to play, pretend spear with their friends. And then they are likely to get some help from a slightly older child who's still interested in doing it in a play way. The adult's not going to have any patience for, come on, dude, you're making your spear out of something that's like a willow withy that's going to wobble. The adult won't have patience for that, whereas a child a year or 2 years older will have patience for that, but can show you how to make a point. Um, so there's all these stages where the child is being scaffolded by somebody who's close to their level of learning. And I mean, this is also Greenberg's incredible insight around the power of age mixing, is that somebody who's too far ahead of you is going to be offering you information that you're not ready for. So again, if you're going to look at natural learning, it's generally the kids who are already quite far along the path who are going to be asking for adult support and apprenticeship. In traditional societies, that doesn't happen young. It happens later for a good reason. So again, if you're going to overemphasize these adult-child relationships, you're going to not let the children develop the proper foundations in order to be able to optimize it when they do get to that point. Adults shouldn't be teaching beginner anything really, I think. Don't know what you guys think.
Yeah. If you were following his, I don't know. I think that it's really valuable for myself. I think that the kind of learning that from on both sides with kid to kid interaction is like really useful. But for what he was saying, it was like and I think it's more in that attachment thinking. So I'm not sure that he's talking really as generally as maybe we're assuming, but like that you would have like relationship learning from someone who's not mature enough for that.
So here's the thing. We don't want an either or. I mean, on the other hand, I mean, this is where you could make the pedophiles argument, you know, that, children should be sexually initiated by somebody 30 years older because, I mean, come on. It's not appropriate. So you don't want an either or. You want each relationship to be in its appropriate place. So you want kids to be doing kid stuff together,
Different things.
and adult child doing adult child stuff together that's appropriate to those connections. So again, if we're going to only take half the elephant, we're going to have a distortion. There's nothing wrong with being it's sort of exposed to peer socialization. And it's important to have adults that you trust who you can come and bounce it off and discuss it with. And I mean, that's exactly what
Definitely.
happens in
I
healthy
think that's the
self-directed
key thing.
education.
Yeah.
It's like kids talk to us about their peer interactions. That's part of what they
Yeah.
use us for.
Yeah, that's
So,
awesome. So they're taking what they need from you as available adults, but they still get their peer interaction.
and privacy.
And
And that's
and to
critically
take the part
important.
of learning that they need. Yeah.
But that is critically important, because my worry again with Maté's approach is that it could encourage this other really toxic thing that's going on now, which is parents getting into kids' business to an inappropriate level. It's not appropriate to know your every conversation your teenager has with their boyfriend. It's not
Yeah.
appropriate. It really isn't.
Yeah, they're allowed separateness, or they're meant to grow separateness, aren't they? And
And
that's included, yeah, and their
and
own
they
thoughts even. They don't need to
yes.
share them all.
And
Yeah,
their own values which might be different to yours, and maybe they're going to make
yeah,
choices you very much disagree with, and you
yeah.
shouldn't be in a position to stop them.
That's a good point, actually, because that's a safe space that friendship provides in the forming of young people's identity, right? It's
Yeah.
like a space to be yourself that is maybe different to your parents, and that you may feel like they won't accept you for, or you might disappoint them in some way because of it.
Yeah. All of that. And they need to be able to make mistakes, and sometimes disastrous mistakes. I mean, it's a human right to
Yeah.
mess up your own life your own way, you know. What we want is we want that positive attachment relationship so that when they feel they're up the creek, they've got somewhere to go. But it shouldn't be our decision to decide when they're up the creek.
Yeah, I think that he assumes a lot of the separateness of that, that parents are meant to give their kids, without like acknowledging that many parents aren't there. Like so
Can everybody else hear you?
Can't hear you, Tasha.
with your
Okay.
kids all the time. Yeah.
We
Sorry,
couldn't
Tasha,
hear
you
you.
dropped out there. You
Oh,
could just
sorry.
repeat, yeah?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just saying that it's a bit dangerous because I think that he's taken it as a given that parents are see their kids as individual and as becoming separate, whereas I think that a lot of parents aren't actually there and they don't allow that, and so yeah, then his ideas can be taken like
Yeah.
really really quite dangerous, a bad way.
If I think of the kids I've seen who I think have been held too close under the wing, I think those parents would love Maté and use him
Yeah,
and use him to
it's
show
a reason.
everybody that they're on the right track. That's
Yeah,
my worry.
yeah,
Mm. So,
yeah. Boo.
so what a great topic, Tasha. I'm really glad we're recording this because I think it's useful, and I'm hoping that you will agree for us to put it out there actually on the public.
Yeah, I'm
Because
happy
I
to.
think it really delves deeper into some of these questions that really need to be explored. And for new
Yeah,
unschoolers and new attachment parents,
yeah,
to be able to, look at these nuances, I think is really, really important.
yeah,
It's like anything else. You need to try and find a rounded picture and a balance. It's like spinach is healthy. That doesn't mean we can live on only spinach. Um, Attachment is critically important, but it's got to be balanced with autonomy.
yeah,
Attachment is the grounding for autonomy, and if it doesn't, either imbalance in either direction is going to not be
yeah,
human
exactly.
health.
Yeah, can take it badly in any of them if you
Hmm.
only take one part of it, right?
Yeah, too much of a good thing and all that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, thank you for discussing it with me. It's been it's been
Ah,
really
no,
good.
great. Any other thoughts on that, or otherwise anything else people want to tackle still in this call? Because we've still got a few minutes left. Okay, well, we also don't have to fill a full hour to the last nth if we're all feeling we've got enough to digest.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, and Lynn?
No, I've lots to think about. But I'm good for now.
Okay. Okay, so there's one more thing I want to say actually, that I think is important. Um, that my experience is also that staff in a self-directed education facility can actually, um, without being therapists and without trying to do therapy, just by being there and being available for deep relationship, we can actually, give children an opportunity to heal some of those attachment problems that they might have had with their parents. That's my experience so far. Um,
Yeah, and
so,
that's probably more likely than a normal school setting too, right? Like or a state school setting. Sorry, I shouldn't say normal.
yeah, I don't know. I think it does happen in those environments too. If you look at some of those sort of real, that kind of ideal of the teacher. It does happen there too. I think some of the mainstream teachers are incredible in that way and really being there for kids who need them. But obviously, it's a much more difficult
It's a
environment to achieve
timing
that in.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think an SDE environment, it's much easier to allow for and accommodate that. But that is definitely one of our roles, and maybe something that we need to be aware of. That is one of our roles, and that is one of the things that some kids might be looking to us for. Isn't just facilitation with more obvious things, but some of them are doing attachment learning with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. On that note, I think I'll stop the recording. Do I have everybody's permission to actually make this one public, as opposed to just sharing with facilitators? So actually put it up there that anybody can listen to it. Yeah? Is that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Thank you and good
Thanks,
night.
Anna.
And
Thank-
are you guys joining on Saturday for the other one?
Yeah.
I'll try. I need